Hi, I'm Brian Moran, founder of Government CIO. Welcome to Government CIO Magazine.
Hi, this is Tony Camilleri with Government CIO. We sat down today with the CIO of NARA, Mr. Mike Wash.
Well, here at the National Archives, there have been some very, very large information services initiatives underway for years. The Electronic Records Archives program, other supporting initiatives that have been associated with our work to manage information about records and the records management itself. So over the last 12 or 13 months that I've been here, a lot of the initiatives have been underway, and the work that I've been doing to help mature the organization has really been a strategic and a coordination activity to try to associate these key initiatives together in a way that we can continue to improve our overall operations of our information systems. But specifically, one of the biggest initiatives is one that actually has occurred just this week. Our work in making the 1940 census records available for the first time in electronic form to the world, and that was released on Monday. So creating the information systems to support that has been a huge initiative. That is actually a transformational initiative in itself. But also preparing the agency and the agency's web presence to be able to support that type of initiative has been one of the key initiatives as well. So there's been almost a sea change that's been going on from an organization that has been somewhat quiet and providing access to records on a modest level, if you will, in today's world, to now making widely expected and very popular records available broadly is a huge transformation that we've had to work on. I would go beyond just an IT organization, because I manage the IT organization, but in today's world, particularly for a CIO to be successful, it's good business management as well as technical management. A CIO has to be sensitive to the business needs and constantly focused on those business needs to ensure that the information technology and systems are developed and deployed in a way to meet those needs. So when I think about the key inhibitors in general that come into play in any type of organization, one of the key inhibitors that I've experienced over my career has been, and this may sound a little odd, but the risk of failure, the fear of the risk of failure. When an organization starts to realize that in order to make progress, you have to be willing to accept risk, and you have to be willing to realize that there may be failures, but if you learn from those failures and move forward, the growth is magnified tremendously. So inhibitors in general, I've learned, is helping teams understand that we aren't all perfect and we will make mistakes, but if we anticipate that mistakes could happen and have plans in place so that when that does happen, we can quickly work through it and move forward to achieve goals. It empowers people to think differently, that they aren't constrained to only doing what was done in the past. Instead, let's think differently, knowing that thinking differently is going to cause criticism, it's going to cause the potential for failure, but if we walk into it knowing that, and there's not going to be any real harm associated with having a few missteps, provided that we continue to make progress, the progress is usually multiplied many times once that's in place. So it's enabling people to make decisions, take on risks, accept failures when they occur, and continue to grow. There's a couple parts to that. I'd like to go back to my comment that IT organizations today need to be business savvy and very aware of what the business needs are, in addition to being really good at IT. And that's a change. The change that's been happening in the CIO world, over the last 5 or 6 years, my best estimate. Early on, when the CIOs were first established in the corporate world as well as in the government space, the CIOs were primarily responsible for maintaining data centers, IT operations, making sure that the systems were in place and reliable and functioning. In the new world of CIOs and the organizations that support the CIO, there has to be a very, very strong awareness and appreciation for the customer. It's customer first, understanding what has to be done, and then making sure that the IT systems are developed in a way that really meets the customer needs. So it's much more than making sure that the servers and the networks and the infrastructures are working. It's much, much more than that now. So one of the key enablers in looking at how to staff an organization like that is looking for people that are technically savvy in understanding today's technology and also realizing that the technology is changing at such a rapid rate that they have to be aware of what's coming on the horizon. Because the horizon for us is maybe 6 months away. It's not 18 months or 2 years away. Things happen fast. So there has to be technical savvy, customer focus, and an appreciation and a willingness to work in an environment that changes probably faster than you can describe it. The National Archives has had a long history of good collaboration, strong collaborations. And it goes back to the time of even printed material. My former agency, the Government Printing Office, we were a strong partner with the National Archives in the publishing of the Federal Register. That collaboration dates back over 75 years from when the Federal Register was created, working closely with the Government Printing Office so that it could get printed and distributed every business day. That collaboration stems from understanding the complementary nature of the two organizations. The Federal Register is responsible for composing and managing the newspaper of the federal government associated with the rules and regulations. The Government Printing Office is responsible for printing and publishing federal documents and publications. So strong complementary skills and an association that worked very well. The same is true in most any topic that you want to talk about when it comes to collaborations. It's an understanding of what the relationships and complementary aspects are. In today's world, where information is widely expected to be electronic in nature, and the mission of agencies don't necessarily change, the expectations for our need to collaborate are growing dramatically. In the world of electronic records, we need to figure out how to collaborate with every one of the federal agencies in participating with providing records to us in an electronic form, much as we have done over the years in getting analog records delivered to us in paper form, tapes, films, etc. So the collaboration is really, again, understanding our role and mission, having a good grasp of the technology and technology changes, and in working with the other agencies to ensure that there's an understanding of what our mission is, what their mission is, and how we can best work that together. In the world, in the CIO world across the federal government, and in today's world of electronic records, there's a strong need for collaboration, because our electronic systems across the federal government need to work well together for us to really be able to manage the extremely high volume of electronic records that we're managing, and ultimately NARA is responsible for. Much like the last conversation that we had about collaboration, the interface, if you will, between another agency and the National Archives needs to be well understood so that information can pass quickly. Just like in the days like today, where we receive physical boxes of materials from agencies that are delivering their records to the National Archives for preservation and archiving, that in one way, shape, or form is like an interface. The method of delivering those analog materials is in a box. There's a record schedule that's created, and the forms are associated with actually moving that material from one agency to the National Archives is well established and documented. That's an interface. As we move more and more into the electronic world, the equivalent of that type of interface has to be developed and coordinated with the other federal agencies so that that transfer of information can happen in a very seamless and effective way. So the more that agencies can work with us in understanding the process, the better. The more they can work with the National Archives in understanding how to do good records management of their own materials, the better. So they'll improve their records management process of what is an official record, what is not an official record, and how to manage those things through the records life cycle, which is a core skill of the National Archives. Will help them, it helps us, and then the material will flow in a very effective way. Training is really key. It plays a very important role. And training also is changing as well. When I refer to the rate of change of technology that information technology and information systems type of personnel have to be aware of, it makes training even more important. When technologies are changing faster than you can describe them, which is clearly the case today, staying current and trained in those technologies that are changing so fast also becomes a challenge of how do you keep your staff aware and trained to do that. So there's training on the technology and training on the forward-looking technology that is critical. A lot of it is done by association with projects that are being worked on. Some of it is formal training, some of it is training on their own. But it goes back to how do you create an organization that is capable of handling the high demands of change and being customer focused. The training needs to be complementary to that, and some of it is going to be trained on their own. The portfolio planning is one of the key things that any CIO needs to be very well aligned with. Here at the National Archives, we have an IT portfolio of systems that is between 50 and 60 key systems, from very large to somewhat small. And if we included all of the very, very small systems, many of them are single user type of systems, it would be hundreds. But of the ones that are key systems for managing the records and the data associated with records, there's probably 50 or 60. Portfolio management comes into play, particularly as you look at how do you optimize your organization and optimize your portfolio, particularly in times where there's constrained budgets and constrained resources and shorter time to market expectations for delivering functionality. So what we've done here is, first step is always pretty easy. Try to gather the inventory of systems that are really part of our portfolio. It's an ongoing process in the federal government maintaining portfolios. So that's really the easy part. The more difficult part comes in looking at the associations between those systems and how they need to relate and how they could actually converge or be merged together over time to actually, hopefully, shrink the portfolio in number of systems and having a roadmap, if you will, from what it is today to what it will be in the future so that you can start to plan how you're going to get there. That's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is really to create a governance system, and a governance process probably is the proper way to state it. And a governance process is a simple matter of describing which groups are responsible for which aspects of this portfolio of systems. We have project teams that go off and do things that create functionality, like the 1940 census I referred to earlier. There was a small project team with a very interesting public-private partnership associated with creating that solution. But then supporting that project team is a business requirements group that really goes and looks at what the customer needs are within the agency to figure out what needs to get resolved. And they manage a repository of data associated with what are the business needs that our information systems needs to do. So that group doesn't figure out how to do it, they just figure out what needs to get done. And then the next level of governance is an architecture group of understanding, now that we have the requirements, how do these requirements get mapped into our portfolio of systems so that we can leverage what we already have or create something new or merge functionality. It's playing that big chess game in the sky of all of these systems to best optimize the technology and resources and budget that we have to deliver the solutions that the business requirements define. And then ultimately there's a steering committee that has oversight. Many times in many agencies it's called an investment review board that looks at these portfolio of systems in some sort of aggregate, understands what the investment is going to be to deliver the functionality and meet the customer needs and the timing expectations so that they can have some oversight into how to best invest dollars and resources to meet the needs that are highest priority for the agency. Security is an ongoing and ever-changing challenge. And in today's world with information systems, it is one of the biggest challenges because it's a threat that is always lurking. There's a number of ways that we are addressing the security issue. And one of them is close collaboration with other federal agencies that are developing federal-wide cybersecurity initiatives. Department of Homeland Security is key in this. They have systems that we can use that can actually serve as watchdogs to a lot of our internet activity and our system activities. And they can provide alerts to us. So that's a key element of the strategy going forward. Also, given the types of systems and the type of threats that are out there, we have to very, very carefully look at what those threats are, new and emerging, and make sure that we have tools in place in our information systems to be able to detect and quickly remediate any sort of threat that comes upon us. And that is an absolute ongoing activity. There's no stopping there, because as soon as there's one threat that's been addressed, another 2 or 3 come up. So it's continuous diligence toward the whole IT security and just never blinking. Well, we talked about the governance. That's one of the key initiatives that we have right now is getting a governance structure in place and portfolio management in place using some very good best practices for system design lifecycle management, so that there's a very clear process starting with understanding what a system needs to do, leading to solutions that can be delivered that will be effective. But making sure that we follow a process that continuously reflects back on what the customer needs are. And also running the IT organization really from a business perspective of understanding the customer needs, understanding what the investments are, making sure that the proper choices are being made for technology and partnerships and solutions. So I think that is going to be a real key to our success moving forward. One of the key initiatives that we have here that it's still very much in the strategy stage, and it cuts across the entire government. And it's an initiative that you may have heard referred to as big data, the big data challenge. And when you read the words and start to look at the understanding of what big data means, you start thinking about, oh, there's a lot of data that's being stored and a lot of data that's being created. That's true, but when you're thinking about archiving and preserving big data, it becomes much, much more complicated. Even in the world of little data, when you start thinking about preserving little data and knowing what the implications of preservation means. Preservation means that whatever the information is, whether it's electronic data or analog data, that data is going to be usable in perpetuity, forever, the life of the Republic. So in the world of paper documents, we have preservation processes to ensure that that material is going to be kept in a way that it's not going to degrade in a way that it becomes unusable. And if it happens to happen, like for example some audio recordings, the media starts to degrade, so you have to do something to actually replace that. You take an audio recording, you convert it to a digital file, and then the challenge moves from that analog recording preservation on media to digital. And how are you going to make a digital recording usable in perpetuity? What is the readback mechanism going to be 50 or 100 years from now for an audio recording that was created from a tape? We don't know. So the whole preservation of electronic material is a huge challenge that we focus on. In the world of big data, where data is being created at an increasingly growing rate across the federal government, how do you manage that data knowing that it has to be preserved, aspects of it preserved in perpetuity, and then how do you really get your arms around gaining access to this data? A wonderful example is the 2010 census. In 2011, the National Archives took receipt of the 2010 census, which was collected completely in an electronic form by the census. It's now located here at the National Archives. It's 330 terabytes of data. That's big data, but it's only a drop in the bucket. The only effective way for us to receive 330 terabytes of data was on a truck. So talk about all these cool networks and gee whiz things of moving data around the universe, forget it. When you're talking about moving big data, the only effective way of doing it is physically. So we received racks of storage equipment from the Census Bureau, took physical receipt of it, 330 terabytes, and then we had to work on making sure that all the data was there as they said it was, and process it. Took months. That's big data. We know that NASA is sitting there with petabytes of data to send to us. So from a federal government perspective, and knowing the role of the National Archives, we need to find a solution to how to move big data, if we want to move it at all, and then how to manage that data so that it can be preserved in perpetuity. Very difficult questions that go well beyond just the National Archives. It's a federal government initiative that really needs to be addressed. And within the CIO Council, there's discussion of records management, which is good. There's discussion of big data, which is good. And there's also discussions about moving to the cloud. And the cloud ultimately is going to be part of the solution to data. And my contention is that how to deal with big data is to never move it. Leave data at rest. So if NASA creates 1.5 petabytes of data, what we need to do as a federal government is figure out where that data is, probably in some cloud environment, or would be a cloud environment, but eventually within NASA, gain access to that cloud so that NARA is now responsible for managing that data so that we have the burden of maintaining usefulness in perpetuity and never having to move it. So it's virtually managing data in a cloud environment and relieving the burden of moving, but the burden of preservation persists.